Hello, and welcome to I Am Dad podcast with your fatherhood authority, Kenneth Braswell. 30 minutes of wisdom, information, resources, and nuggets to help you on your fatherhood journey. Or maybe you're just curious and want to hear some real talk about fatherhood, family, and the minds of men. Well, guess what? We got you too. Sit back, grab your pad and pen, and maybe even bring a little something to sip on. Enjoy 30 straight minutes of fatherhood, family, and fun with the fatherhood authority, Kenneth Braswell.
Welcome to I Am Dad podcast. I'm your host, Kenneth Braswell, and I am beyond excited to kick off season 4 with you. This season is all about empowering fathers, transforming families. We're going to dive deep into practical strategies, inspiring stories, and resources to help fathers like you make a meaningful impact in your families and your communities. You know, recently I had a conversation with a young father who shared how listening to this podcast helped him reconnect with his teenage son. As someone who has teenage boys in his house, I know how important it is to try to find a way to connect, you know, particularly with boys. I think it's a little different when it comes to girls, but teenage boys, particularly when it comes to their dads, it takes a little more to kind of figure out how to connect with them. I'll share a little later on some of the things that I've done to connect with those boys. But it's always heartwarming to hear someone who listens to the podcast, and for me to hear that the podcast is actually having an impact on someone's life, particularly a dad and his children, a mom and their children, a dad and a mom, whatever it looks like, you know, whatever I can say and whatever we can say and whatever you can hear any of our guests talk about and strategies that they use and reflecting and telling their stories that can help you in your own life. Hey, I'm all for it. I just, you know, that's all we're trying to do with this podcast, trying to bring as many voices as possible to the space, you know, so that you can get a full plethora of voices and people and perspectives and talents and experts and people just like you and I, you know, who are trying to figure out this parenting thing. And so, but that moment reminded me of why this work is so important. Right? Fatherhood isn't a role; it's a responsibility. It's a privilege and an opportunity that allows you to leave a lasting legacy. And so, this is why this work is so important to me. That we continue to do this. Like I always keep telling you, and I've been telling you for the last couple of years. I thought I was going to do this podcast for a year, and then I was going to get bored with it and move on to something other exciting project that I came up with. And here I am entering season 4, and we're still going, still having dynamic guests, still bringing innovative voices, passionate voices, influential voices, everyday voices, expert voices, you know, anyone, you know, who we can find. I mean, it's kind of easy for me because I'm immersed in this field and I'm always around great people and great minds. And so podcast guests just pop up for me now. Some of them come through me reaching out and seeking and trying to bring particular voices into the space. And every once in a while, you know, people will reach out to me with ideas about having them come on. And I'm going to let you guys know that I almost never interview anyone whose primary goal is to sell a product just because you have a book. And without me knowing you, you know, without me being able to do some research to see, you know, what your work is in this field. This podcast is not just about telling someone about a book that's just been written about fatherhood. It is it a part of impactful work that's being done? Have you thought about practical ways to which the book can be used for programs and practitioners to help their fathers, and not just by reading it? How much additional thought have you put in it? Documentaries, you know, I'm not in the business of promoting documentaries and books and products. I'm just not. If that work is not connected to some longer, more intense way to which we're going to impact fathers and families, then quite honest with you, I'm not interested in it. And so we do have a platform at papauniversity.com to which we will put those resources on, but they won't come with an hour of my time talking to you about a children's book that you just wrote on fatherhood. It's just not going to happen. And so, but before we continue to move, I want to take a short break just to kind of talk about some statistics, because what I want to do with the podcast also is bring some other elements into the podcast where we're bringing you some news about research, new products, new statistics, new new um, innovative and promising models, and how people are actually doing this work out there. And I thought I would start with this particular statistic for this year. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, 91% of fathers and 74% of mothers who live with their children also live with the child's other parent. However, for Black fathers, societal challenges still persist, including barriers to employment, housing, and access to legal support. But on a brighter note, studies also show that fathers are spending 3 times as much time with their children as they did in the 1960s. That's a win for fatherhood, but there's still room for growth. And so while research allows us to analyze and kind of understand what's happening with fatherhood and where fathers are showing up in the space and what that looks like, it's important for you to know that, because it helps us establish the narrative, the societal narrative, for fathers, and allows us to dispel some of the myths out there about fathers, about men, about parenting, particularly about their desires. And more specifically for me, for fathers of color, more specifically than that, Black fathers. Because the stereotype about Black fathers is that we're not engaged, we don't take care of our children, we're only having babies and moving on. And that is an absolute lie. It is an absolute lie. Research is now revealing a different narrative about all fathers, but more specifically Black fathers. 2013 Pew Research says that Black fathers in this country are the most engaged cohort of fathers than any other cohort of fathers in this country, including white fathers and Latino fathers and other fathers. Black fathers are engaged. They are there. They're not missing. You're just not looking for them, and you're just not engaging them. And why? Because it takes a little work to do that. But think about why it's so hard to engage them. You've been ignoring them for so long and using them as a backdrop for much of the other work that you're trying to do for other family parts, but you're not thinking about fathers inclusively as a result of how fathers can play roles in enhancing the well-being of our children and establishing stable homes, and even doing better and helping moms in that space, right? If they just need a little help. And so let's start thinking about that. My personal story, or a personal story I love to share. When I became a father, I didn't have all the answers, but I learned along the way. And one of the most powerful lessons I learned is this, and that is children don't need perfect parents. They need present parents. And so it took me a while to do that. I failed in that space with my oldest daughter, because I was young and I was dumb. And to be quite honest with you, the roadmap I had to parenting wasn't a good roadmap. I didn't have anybody that was a role model for me and how to be a great parent. I just didn't. It didn't exist to me. And the models in my community were just as, I'm not going to use the word dysfunctional or broken, because I don't think that households in our community, where primarily single mothers, led households, were anything, you know, to the extent of broken or dysfunctional. They were what they were. But if I was trying to find a roadmap or a journey within that, I couldn't, because it just wasn't there. It wasn't until I got older that I started to see great examples of fathers showing up in the lives of their children and being unapologetically available, and committed to family and taking care of their children. And those are the folks that I began to learn for and change my perspective about the importance of me being in the life of my child. And so it's critically important that we understand that we don't have to be perfect. We just have to be present. 2025, we also want to bring some new elements to I Am Dad podcast. And so I want to do something really interesting, probably once a month. We're going to see how it works out. We want to host like how to episodes where we kind of tackle everyday challenges like helping kids with college applications, managing their mental health, or even cooking a meal with your family. And so we want to hear from you on some ideas and things that you would like for us to share with you, and experts that we would want to bring into the space so that they can help you with some of these more practical pieces of parenting. You know, the college applications is a huge one with FAFSA and the difficulty and the complexity of filling out those FAFSA forms, and then the complexity of our family dynamics, right? Because there's financial information that's necessary to fill out those forms, and if you don't have a great relationship with the other co-parent, sometimes that could be a little sticky if you're going to sit down and start talking about, who has what and whose income should be placed here, and revealing areas of your income that you haven't shared before, which is why it's so important to kind of understand this co-parenting piece, because there does have to be a certain level of transparency between co-parents in order to co-parent to your fullest. And so I want to talk more about that. I want to kind of begin to start helping. I'm moving away from this whole notion of talking specifically about relationships. While relationships are important, I don't think that the element of romantic relationships in this space is more important than co-parenting relationships, because co-parenting has to take place regardless of what your relationship circumstance is, the proximity to which you guys live with each other, or the nature of custody and parenting time, or where you are. And so all of those things factor into co-parenting. We've written a couple of resources that you could find on Papa University about co-parenting, including estrangement and having difficult conversations with your co-parent. And so I wish someone would have, been there to help me with some difficult conversations that I was having with the mother of my children, that didn't have to be so difficult, with just a little information, right? Sometimes that's all we need. So we want to kind of do some how-to episodes, not just how to change a tire, how to boil an egg, or how to heat water, how to change the tire on your car, but other things. We want to begin to start doing some how to's for our fathers within the context of I Am Dad podcast. We also want to bring on some guests that can help navigate the challenges like reentry, and fathers and moms that are coming home from incarceration. We want to talk a little more about financial literacy for families, right? And we even want to kind of pull in some voices from the next generation of fathers, our Generation Z and our Alpha Gen, who are now moving into child rearing ages. And so these younger populations of fathers who think very differently about society, they think very differently about parenting. We want to be able to speak to them as well, to help them along the way, and to build a bridge between those generations. There is a huge generational gap between Gen Z and Alpha Gen and baby boomers, even Gen X and hip hop generation and millennials. To a certain extent, there's a huge gap between these younger parents and the older parents. And so being able to bring some of that wisdom into the space is going to be important and critical for us to do as well. And we also want to begin to start digging into some of the other discipline areas outside of just parenting, to help fathers specifically kind of understand the essentialness and importance of them being in the life of their child. For instance, did you know that children with involved fathers are 39% more likely to earn mostly A's in school? And that's just about presence. It's just about engagement. It's just about, paying attention to the needs of your children and supporting them and helping them, you know, be able to learn. I'm telling you straight up right now, my son, he comes in, and it's been this way for a long time. I'm not a numbers person. I'm a letters person. I write, craft, I write stories, I use letters. My wife is a financial person. She's numbers. She understands numbers. And the new math that these kids are taking these days, I am of no help whatsoever. No longer are we using those little calculators with the solar thing on it that don't have no batteries, and the numbers kind of halfway come up. These scientific calculators these kids have to have, starting now in like middle school. Like we had to buy these calculators in middle school for our son. And high school, forget it. Like people are like gifting, those calculators down the line to their other children so that they don't have to buy those things anymore. And you think about in low income poor communities where you don't have $75 to spend on a calculator, particularly if you have a child who's in honor classes and they're taking advanced math classes. And so, but we want to be able to find ways to help fathers understand the importance of their presence within the educational aspect of their children's lives, because they do have an impact on a lot of different things in the school setting, not just their grades, but they also have an impact on their self-esteem and lowering disciplined behaviors and engagement in things that may kind of veer them off the path of being successful in school. And so it's important that we bring information in these spaces around things like education and mental health and housing and physical health and nutrition and some of these other spaces where we can really bring some experts in to kind of help fathers understand, not only for those fathers who are within the households with their children, but those fathers who are on the outside of the households with their children, who are trying to find ways to make connects with their children. Last year, one of our dads that went through our Gentle Warriors Academy shared how he started volunteering at his son's school. And that one decision transformed not just his relationship with his son, but his own sense of purpose, because he began to see the impact of his presence on his son, because he was showing greater interest in his educational life and showing up for his son at the school, whether it was just going to an all pro dad event, being a mystery reader, a school crossing guard, joining a PTA, mentoring, any activity that you can do as a dad in your child's school is extremely important. The other thing that it helps is with relationships with the teachers and the administration in the school, because now they become familiar with you and you may have access to greater information as a result of that, and may be able to help your child with things that you may not be able to help them with if it wasn't for the relationship you had with the school. So it's important to begin to start thinking about multiple ways that you can help your child in those spaces. A couple of other things that you might be able to do is just think about just simply being present. That's what we're talking about, right? Set aside dedicated time for your kids without distractions. I talk about with our dads a lot of times these no phone zones, right? And so in your house, if you're a family that eats dinner together, your table should be a no phone zone, so that it allows for organic conversation to take place and talk about the issues and challenges of the day, where you can share, cross pollinate, with your other children, with your wife and others who are at the table. And if you are a daddy cab like me, and a mommy cab like my wife, where we're in the car with our nephew and son almost an hour and a half, 2 hours a day, transporting them from home to school and back until basketball practice and basketball games and school activities. And you jump in the car with your teenage child, and not even teenage now, middle school and possibly even elementary school, and you're in the car and you're zoning in your zone, and they're on their phone the entire time. And so a great thing to do is make your car a no phone zone. And it doesn't have to be every day. You could say every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, the car is a no phone zone for everybody, not just the children, but for you. And if your wife or girlfriend or something is also in the car, no phone zone. Like when we get in the car, this is an opportunity, for us to talk and have conversations. The other thing is like ask questions. Like every conversation that you have with your child shouldn't be in sentences that end with a period. Those are command and demand conversations. It is much better when the vast majority of your sentences end with a question mark, because when you begin to ask questions, it gives your children the ability to be able to kind of come into a conversation in a way that they're comfortable with coming into the conversation. I've changed, what I would say, to my son when he gets in the car by simply asking, "How was your day?" And, be honest, let's be real honest about this. When you start doing that, you're probably only going to get good, it's all right. You're going to get some one word, answers. But over time, as they begin to see that you have interest in their school life and in their life, they'll begin to open up a little bit. And then you begin to ask more questions. Like, even if they say, it's all right, you come back, well, help me understand what's all right. What was all right about today? What happened in your school day that was okay? And then what happened in your school day that wasn't okay? Right. And so once they begin to start finding some language that's comfortable in speaking to you in, that's a good thing. And so find ways to ask the right questions. And you don't have to get it all right the first time. I think it evolves over time as you get to understand how you communicate and how your children communicate. And then the other thing and last thing is model behavior. You can't demand of your kids what you don't demand of yourself. And so, if you're going to coach them to work hard, to be focused, to be committed, you have to show the same thing in your space of work, profession, or at home. You have to show commitment and you have to show focus and desire to be the best in everything that you do. And so those are just some actionable tips because I think that it would be great, for each of you and to challenge yourself to just find one way to connect with your child this week. Um, in whatever that is, it could be simply, asking them about their day or planning a family game night, something that allows you to be able to connect with your child. Couple of resources I want to share with you. One is make sure that the rest of this month and beyond, you are tapping into I Am Dad podcast because we are bringing a lot of information and a lot of wisdom to the table. This month, we're bringing to the podcast Jerry Kraft, who is probably one of the, not probably, he is one of the top children's book authors right now with New Kid. He's going to be talking about on his podcast a great way to read with your children and how you can help them understand identity and resilience. And so he's going to talk about his writing career and how he came about with New Kid and why it's important for kids to read and parents to be involved with them. And so make sure you tune in to that particular podcast. The other thing I want you to look for is go to Papa University. POPPA University.com. POPPA University.com. And there's all kinds of resources on that website. We built that website just for you as dads, and we've loaded it with a lot of information, articles. We've loaded it with resources. We have dad jokes. We have some interesting databases with TV dads and movie dads for you to have fun on the site as well. And then there's a bot that's called Sage. If you have any questions, just type them in a bot and Sage the Owl will answer questions, and where they can't or where he can't answer questions, he will give you links to go places to find the information and the resources that you're looking for. And if you're ever on the site and you cannot find what you're looking for, just simply go into Sage the Bot and ask the question and say, I was on the site and I was looking for X, Y, and Z and I didn't see it. Is it possible that you can begin to put that kind of information on the site? And so we're looking to build Papa University much bigger this year. So let me give you some closing thoughts as my allergies are killing me, as you can hear. I thought allergies only kind of hit you in the summertime. I didn't know that allergies also hit you in the wintertime. Um, but let's just noodle on this for a moment because this is something that Dr. Ronald Mincy used to always say. Let me noodle on this. Um, Fatherhood is a journey. It's not a destination. And so it's okay to make mistakes. It's how you respond and grow that matters. Remember, you are your child's hero, even on the days you feel like you've fallen short. So just show up, just be there. We're hoping that this podcast gives you, 45 minutes to an hour of hearing people talk about their passion in being fathers or talking about their passion in serving fathers. That's what we want to be, in this space. We want to be organic. We want you to know our guests. So when we bring in our guests, we just don't, you know, tell me about your book. Why did you write your book? Tell me about your life. Why we want to bring you into their lives so that you can understand. If you have listened to any I Am Dad podcast, you'll hear that we start each and every one of our podcasts off with tell us your daddy story. And it's really important to hear that, because what you get to hear is how that particular person thinks about fatherhood, how they've had to navigate fathers, how they had to navigate their own fathers, being a father, working with fathers, whatever the case may be. We never um, push them to speak about their daddy's story in a particular way, because I think it's important for them to just speak about whatever they believe their daddy's story is. Like, think about that for yourself. Like, what's your daddy's story? What is your daddy's story? If you're at a party, if you're at a party somewhere and people are at the party and they're beginning to kind of have a conversation about fathers and everybody is talking about their dads or them being fathers, think about it for a second. Like, what's your daddy's story? What would you talk about? How would you engage in that conversation? Or will you just not engage in that conversation? Because let me tell you this, not engaging in the conversation also says something. And so think about that this week, and share it with us. It's something that we would like to see, that we would like to talk about. If on our segments we could start reading letters from our fans, um, notes from our dad, notes from our fans, so that we can share with other listeners what our listeners are talking about. And this is also important. I don't talk about this a lot. I didn't talk about it last year, and it could be as a result of why we got the results, as a result of me not asking. I know that was a lot of results, right? Subscribe. Don't forget to subscribe to I Am Dad podcast on whatever platform you happen to be listening to I Am Dad. One of the biggest disappointments, and we've had some great things happen with I Am Dad podcast over the last 3 years. But one of the more disappointing things that has not happened with I Am Dad podcast is our subscriber base is not growing at all. So we've been providing you with great information for 3 years, and we have 52 subscribers. To me, that's crazy. And here's why that's crazy. Because last year we had 10,000 downloads. 10,000 downloads. And not only did we have 10,000 downloads on our podcast platforms, but we also had 10,000 views on our YouTube platform. So we're talking 20,000 views and only 52 subscribers. It's important that you engage with us, because you know how social media works. If there's no engagement, the algorithms don't push our content to a broader audience unless we pay for it. But how our message begins to move, how we begin to change the societal narrative as it relates to fatherhood, so that more people can hear our stories and understand what our issues are, I need your engagement. And so we spend a lot of hours a week putting these podcasts together, from the graphic design, from the posting, from the language development, from reaching out to guests, getting them scheduled, actually interviewing them. You're talking about, for each episode, um, 3 hours of work, if not more, goes into each and every episode that we do. Some of them even more. And if you can just subscribe, to our YouTube page, or to your social media platforms, or to your podcast platforms, it would be a tremendous help for I Am Dad podcast. And this year, I have committed to being a little more vocal and asking about um, subscribing. You're even going to create some promos and commercials that's going to drop right dead in the middle of our podcast that remind you as you're listening to it to subscribe to the podcast. And then the last thing, or next to last thing before I close, is a personal thing that I want to do this year. And the personal thing is we just lost a critical component of our agency, Fathers Incorporated, in the name of Lawrence Wilbon, who served as our vice president for community and business development. He passed away on December 26th. We're still reeling from that because he leaves a irreplaceable hole um, in our agency that we have to find a way to compensate for his loss. And so, but one of the things that Lawrence always encouraged me to do was to be bold and unapologetic in my voice, to be more active, to be more present, to insert my voice in places where it is necessary for people to hear the voice of someone who represents fathers, Black fathers, all families, all children, but from a fatherhood perspective. And I vowed for 2025 that I would do just that, that I would be much more bold. Some people would say, Kenny, you're already bold. Well, I'm going to be bolder, and I'm going to be even more unapologetic for pushing the envelope as it relates to um, fathers, more specifically, men and boys in general, because there is a need to counter the narrative that is taking place in society as it relates to boys and men. That we have to counter with our own messages, not dismiss any other messages out there that may be about specifically women and girls. But one conversation cannot take place without the other conversation. As I've said to many folks that have called Fathers Incorporated and wanted to talk to me about something, specific, um, and I would hear this term allies. And my response to that is, to be honest with you, I don't need any more allies. Um, I'm actually getting too old where I'm starting to say I don't need any more friends, but that's not true. But I don't need any more allies. And let me tell you why I don't need allies. Because allies are people that come into your space to advocate and support your cause, but doesn't demand that you support our cause. That's an ally. I'm not interested in spending my energy in supporting your cause if you're not interested in supporting my cause in a real way. What I want is partners, because that's what partners do. Partners give and take, and they take on, and they are advocates not only for the work that they're trying to accomplish within their own calling and purpose, but they also understand the importance of being a partner for your causes and for your causes and purpose. And so as we move forward in 2025, I'm going to begin to speak more about true partnership and what true partnership looks like. And so be mindful that before you call Fathers Incorporated or you call Kenneth Braswell about partnering, that it is that you are very clear about what is the win-win-win in the scenario. And what I mean by that is, what's the win for you, what's the win for me, and what's the win for our fathers and families. And if you can't very clearly state what that win looks like, We are probably not going to partner at all. Um, at all. And I'm dead serious about that. I'm far enough along in my life right now to be very picky and choosy about how we spend our time and how we spend our resources. And so if um, you haven't taken the time to think about how a partnership is beneficial to everyone involved, then I don't have time to um, chase your dream. I have my own dream about what I'm trying to impact. I have my own goals. I have my own desires. I have my own callings and purpose that I'm trying to fulfill. And I can't be distracted by having someone in my space who's only looking to advance their own causes. That can't happen with us anymore. Not to say that there are not people out there that's okay with that, but we're not going to be okay with that as an agency. And we're not going to use our platform, I Am That Podcast, to promote folks just for the sake of promoting their products and promoting what their work is, if that work is not beneficial to others in a real tangible way. Um, to uplift our families and our communities, and more specifically in our space, uplift our fathers. So, as I close, thank you so much for listening on this first episode of I Am Dad podcast. I only speak solely on two um, weeks out of the year, the last week of the year and the first week of the year. The last week, I always talk about what we've accomplished in the year and how proud we are, happy holidays, and season's greetings and all that good stuff. And then at the beginning of the year, just really kind of talking about, what we're looking at and what we're trying to accomplish for year 2025, and where we're looking at going, and really kind of just talking my piece and talking my, um, what's on my mind. And I didn't talk about everything. I don't want to overwhelm you today about everything that's on my mind. I'll eke that out over the course of the year and over the course of the episodes. And just pay attention to our websites, our social media platforms. Make sure you subscribe, as I said before. And we're going to try to really be of a impactful, huge service to everyone under the sound of our voice. We're going to look at doing some very innovative things this year, telling more of our story, ramping up our Moynihan Institute for Fatherhood Research and Policy, and doing more policy writing and brief writing and putting more narrative on the page. And then hopefully, God willing, this year, I will be dropping my new book that I've been writing now. Almost 7 months I've been writing on it. Hopefully by the end of 2025, I could get that book published and out there in the space. And the book is called Too Seasoned to Care. And it's a book on aging, and it talks about how as you get older, you begin to start um, thinking very differently about the things that you get involved in and the things that you are engaged in. You begin to set different priorities because those priorities have changed for you as you have become more seasoned in life. There is a subtitle for it, and I won't share it with you today on this podcast, but it speaks to when you are seasoned, that you begin to care less about how people think about you, and you begin to start to care less about how you think about people to a certain extent. Not to be dismissive of people, but you don't allow those thoughts, how people think about you and how you think about the world, to smother your narrative, and to smother your story. And so I want people to kind of understand from my own life how I have learned and how I am now in my season space in life, what I've learned and how I learned it, and how I am navigating what is shorter time in front of me than behind me. And so, yeah. So, again, subscribe to us, subscribe to our newsletter, get us on social media. As the young folks say, Google us. You can either Google Fathers Incorporated, you can Google Kenneth Braswell, or you can Google I Am Dad Podcast, Papa University, any of those things. And I guarantee you will find your way to me. And so thank you. Happy New Year. 2025. Wishing each and every one of you a prosperous year. Let's be innovative. Let's be bold. And as I always end my shows, please be kind to others as you are kind to yourself, or you might find yourself by yourself. Always shoot high for your goals, because even if you miss, you'll be amongst the stars. And as my good friend Art Mitchell always said to me, Kenny, it's nice to be important, but it's much more important to be nice. Until next Sunday, Happy New Year and peace out.
Thank you so much for taking the time to spend with us. You've been listening to I Am Dad Podcast. We hope that you have been informed, encouraged you to think, or even inspired your heart for the love of dads. The conversation does not end here. Come back and join us next week. Same time, same place. Or you can continue the dialogue on our I Am Dad Facebook page. We also invite you to listen to past episodes, learn more about us, and keep up with special activities by visiting IamDadPodcast.com. That's IamDadPodcast.com. Until next time, I leave you with this reminder of manhood from 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 11. When I was a child, I spoke as a child. I understood as a child. I thought as a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things. Because of this reminder, I will always understand that I am dad, period.